you take it for granted. The education is just going to be there. It's one of those fundamental elements of our society. And I think if you don't have to look at it in depth, you can just accept that it's humming along and that it just is.
Especially as the state that is consistently ranked #1 for public education, but only for a certain type of student in a certain zip code or a certain district. If education really is the great equalizer, then it means that everyone needs to have access to that equal education.
I think everybody approaches this work with two different angles. Either you grew up and you got a great education and you've kind of seen what can happen with that, or you've kind of grown up in a community where there wasn't good education.
I went to high school in the Springfield area. Going into college, I realized that I wasn't as prepared as individuals who had went to other school districts. It's not fair that because of where we live, we won't be getting the same level of education as someone who lives in another part of the state or in a different district.
Ultimately, decisions about education aren't made by those that are on the front lines. Decisions about education are made by our lawmakers.
We connect people who make decisions on education with those who experience education.
And so it's so important for us to be working to ensure that those that are on the receiving end of education, those parents, students, educators, are really given a voice in the system.
What I appreciate about Stand for Children is that it leverages the power that we have as adults to make a difference in the lives of our students and children.
I was like this kind of parent who complains about everything. The education is not good. There are some teachers who I don't really like, but I felt like powerless.
We empower them in order for them to advocate for their children's education.
I spent hours on the phone. Sometimes my cell phone would die. I'd be waiting, they put me on hold, and I didn't stop calling.
We are involved fighting for our kids' education and get better.
Too often our parents and our kids are left out of the political discussion that takes place at the state houses and even in the local school districts themselves.
But the reality is that the policies that Stand for Children's working on aren't just affecting low-income students, aren't just affecting an urban population. Great Teachers, Great Schools is a great example of that.
Great Teachers, Great Schools is great for teachers because it honors the profession. It really professionalizes a system that for so long has been about how long you've sat in a seat instead of how you're growing in your professional life. Being in front of a classroom is the greatest privilege that any of us will ever have, teachers specifically. So we want to make sure that the best people hold those jobs and are in front of our children.
Well, there is a fight shaping up in Massachusetts.
The Massachusetts Teachers Association is calling a proposed state ballot question unconstitutional.
It's a ballot question that is causing a heated debate.
It was an issue that people had identified for years. The problem is everyone was just resigned to, well, that's the way it's always going to be.
A lot of times, people really want to stray away from what we would call these kind of political landmines. It's up to us to not only make the case for why it's good policy, but how we can make sure we maneuver through those political challenges.
It seemed at that point that the MTA was gonna squash this whole thing like a bug. It felt impossible.
It was pretty evident that the union was putting pressure on a lot of the teachers. They knew that Stand had the upper hand and that it was coming to a boiling point.
Launching a major TV campaign, Stand for Children introduced itself to voters with a sub-message to legislators. They have the money to play.
So we decided to take it to the very grassroots level and really engage as many of the voters at that local level as possible. And so our organizing team, through their hard work, went out and educated as many people as we could in communities all across the Commonwealth. If there was one thing we weren't lacking in, it was definitely challenging.
It's hard to make a stand.
And so at every possible moment of opposition, we had almost intentionally figured that we were going to be there, and we were able to go around it. We had a sense of urgency about what we were doing. We knew that now was the time to do it, and that we had the political power and the political capital to get it done. We were able to leverage our people, a really sophisticated lobbying process, and a level, I think, of strategy that hadn't been seen before here in Massachusetts, especially around education issues. So people had no choice but to sit up and take notice.
Feeling a change in the air.
Fundamentally, it changes the way teachers are going to see themselves. Not seeing themselves as being part of the system itself, but being value creators in the system.
This changes everything for kids. By Stand and the MTA coming together to pass this bill, we've shown that we don't have to maintain the status quo in Massachusetts.
I am not impressed, I am blown away.
It is the single most ambitious in scale, in terms of duration, in terms of expense, in terms of effort, in every conceivable metric, the biggest undertaking this Massachusetts team has ever tackled.
What really amazes me and both inspires me about STAND is that we worked collaboratively with the people that we were told would never agree with us.
We have made terrific progress in Massachusetts.
And we're meeting our goals and exceeding our goals.
For the first time, I've personally felt like the work that I'm doing personally is contributing to this great movement.
We're allowed to have the audacity to think that we can change things. And you don't get to work many places where you get to be a little bit bold, a little bit brash in the things that you think and feel, and work towards those goals every day.
You could be so